Now, there's another story which is creating a lot of confusion since morning, and that is, again, it's been planted through the sources, and how credible the sources are, everyone knows. It's been planted that Iran will allow Indian flagged tankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, a conduit of for 40% of the South Asian nation's crude imports. Now, this is coming from an Indian government source, but I have also seen reports of on the Iranian side which are denying this story. Now, given the kind of chemistry which Iran and India have had since the war has broken out, do you think that Iran still has that kind of a pathway where it can allow the Indian tankers to cross through the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, it depends really on how sensible the policymakers in Iran are. They've been through a lot of stress, understandably. I believe that we haven't done a great deal to reassure them, but we've done a little bit, perhaps a little bit late, but we've done a little bit to reassure them. There are many people in the public space who have come out empathetically and sympathetically to Iran. And I believe that the Iranian government must appreciate that. At least their officials on the ground in India, their diplomats on the ground in India seem to have appreciated it, which is a good thing. Now, we're not saying that you have to be friends with Iran to be enemies of the US. But let me just make it clear. It's a matter of choosing what is right between two friends that are fighting. It happened in Ukraine and Russia. It's happening now again, where the GCC countries are joining hands against Iran. And of course, they're joining hands against Iran because the trouble started with Israel pushing America to attack Iran, and then Iran retaliating and responding. Now, we could have done this, we could have done this, is something that we can talk about till the cows come home. But the fact remains that India has a very difficult position to take. We have friends on both sides. And if we don't have friends, we at least have relationships on both sides that we should preserve. We have no problem with that. We're not asking the government to choose one against the other. We should preserve relations. But what is the worth of relations if you don't have the courage to tell your friend that there is a line that must be drawn where they must stop? Or in the country, or from the country, a voice must go out to the world to say, India is unhappy and India is not willing to let this continue. Please stop. Does India have the courage to say this? Does India have the capacity and the position today in the world to say this? Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, has traveled most extensively in the world during the years that he's been India's Prime Minister. Why is he not traveling now? He traveled on the eve of the attack that Israel made. Why doesn't he travel now? Why doesn't he go to those very areas which are being bombarded and which are being attacked and say, I am here and I want this to stop? And perhaps the friends will feel that now that he's gone that far, we must stop. So essentially, it's the voice of India that is missing. It's not being heard anywhere in the world. And sadly, it's not even being heard in our own country.
Absolutely. But you made a mention of the fact that Prime Minister Modi went to Israel just on the eve of the war. Now, do you think that India really has lost Iran's trust? How can Iran trust India now? Will we have the same ties, the same cultural bonding which India had earlier? By this particular visit of Prime Minister Modi, do you think that India has lost that trust of Iran?
Well, these things happen, and you have to make amends if you think that something has gone wrong. To Iran's credit, I believe that we have a very, very deep relationship with them, and that they would be willing to go, because Iran is also not in a very good position. They are fighting with their back to the wall. They have suffered, they have been injured, but they are, with great courage and great resolution, they are fighting back. So I'm not sure that they want to lose India as a friend at this critical time. And if there is something they can do for India, I'm sure they will. They will. But obviously, they would want to see how much India is willing to do for them. It's going to be a two-way thing. Now, when India does something for Iran and does with Iran, India has to be able to, with courage, speak to the United States to say, we can't just give up everybody because you have a problem. We have a relationship with you and we want to preserve a relationship with you, but you can't do it to the exclusion of our other friends, whether it's Russia, whether it's not a friend, but certainly our neighbor, China, or it is Iran. And this is something that we must get them to understand, that you can't exclusively decide who India can be in engagement with and what the extent of that engagement will be.
No, but Mr. Khurshid, you're talking about a candor which is expected of India, some plain speaking which India should do, that we cannot exclude our old friends at the cost of America. But the government is seemingly being found wanted on this front. And they are not speaking. Now, what are those compelling factors? Some say it's Adani, some say it's Epstein files. I'm not getting into the reasons, but the silence is not broken on the part of the government. So how will Iran win its trust? Of course, we are ready to believe that Iran will go all out to ensure that the ties are back. They have the India and Iran both have the same bonding. But even Prime Minister Modi, or for that matter, Indian MEA, has to do some tightrope walking for that and exemplify through their actions.
We are not questioning any tightrope walking. We understand diplomacy is not an easy game. We do understand that. But at least the broad principles must be clear. And the broad principles must be stated to the people at home in India, in Parliament. The broad principles of how we will deal with Iran, to the extent that you can make them available in public, must be stated. Everything is not necessarily what needs to be given to the public. There are confidential areas and so on. You can preserve those confidential areas, perhaps share them only with top leaders in the opposition, but come clean on where we stand. You ask me, I've had some experience. Our government in India ran close to Iran. There are many things that we did with Iran, etc. But do any one of us know exactly where we stand vis-a-vis Iran? We may go and convey our condolence to the Iranian embassy, but do we even have any information that we can give them that will give them greater confidence as far as India is concerned, without in any way undermining whatever relations we have with the US? And as you've just mentioned, our relations with the US seem like one-sided. I mean, whatever they want, they do. Whatever we need and desire, or what we want, they don't even sit down to listen to that, etc. Did anyone ask us? I mean, when Mr. Modi went to Israel, was he told that there was going to be an attack imminent? Was he not told? Now, in both ways, there's something terribly wrong. If you are trusted and you are friends and you are not told, that is bad. And if you are actually told and you keep quiet, that is bad. So somebody must now come out clean and tell us what exactly happened, what compulsions operated, why they could not share it with us immediately, etc. Many questions there. They need to be answered.
Also coming to the fact that there is a very evident opacity when it comes to revealing things to the opposition, or for that matter, even consulting the opposition, because you all have been in the government in the past. You've handled Iran, you've handled America. There's no consultation. But do you believe, Mr. Khurshid, that the need of the hour is that the Prime Minister should call an all-party meeting, given the gravity of the crisis and the kind of crisis which is emerging out of Iran war? Do we think that an all-party meeting should be called immediately on this?
Absolutely, and I think it's nothing that's completely new to our system. As far as our government was concerned, under several prime ministers, we were constantly in touch with the opposition. We even ensured that the opposition was involved in whatever decisions that were taken. But it's only now, since 2014, that the opposition has been kept completely aside, as though they don't understand anything, as though they don't matter at all. And this would give strength to this government. For the first, I mean, it was the last thing that we would want in the opposition, to give strength to this government. But this is a matter of national interest. So if the government gets strength because in a matter of national interest, we stand by the government, what is the problem? But if they don't want to take strength, if they don't want to get encouraged, and they don't want to be fortified by the presence of the opposition, let them choose who in the opposition is helpful to them. After all, they did that after Operation Sindoor, sense of isolation, they sent delegations out to the world, to the
Yes.
wide world, etc. And they asked Congress party members, I went, Congress party MPs to accompany those delegations. And despite having differences with them, we went along and we stood by them because we wanted one voice to go to the world. One single voice, that's the voice of India, must go and resonate in the world. But that's the easy option that they're not accepting.
Absolutely. And while we speak to you, Mr. Khurshid, there are multiple explosions which have been reported across Iran's capital, that is Tehran, other cities, as US Israeli attacks continue. Iraq has shut down oil port operations after these deadly attacks on two foreign oil tankers, as Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, and Saudi Arabia have intercepted more Iranian missiles and drones. So, which is very clear that. Iran is in no mood to back down. Even America doesn't seem to be in a mood to have any kind of a quick exit plan. I don't know how much of a strategy is ready as far as the exit plan is concerned. But what is your gut feeling, and what can you sense that when do you see this war ending?
Well, I think it's a matter of appetite. I think the appetite that the U.S. has, given that they're doing everything in the backdrop of the November midterm election, that their appetite is limited. There is certainly no appetite for casualties, and that's why there will not be any boots on the ground. As far as Iran is concerned, I believe that they are fighting for their life. They're fighting for their existence. They're fighting for their dignity, and therefore they would be far more engaged and involved in that fight than the US is. So this could go on, but it's not US alone. It's the Israelis that are pushing the US, because they've had the buffer of the US forces to be able to fight the 40-year dream that they had of fighting Iran. So they will continue to push, but I believe ultimately the US will have to take a call on it for themselves, and not simply for the sake of any other country, including Israel. And I think that the formulations that are coming from the US president, many of those formulations give people hope that there are certain openings coming up, certainly somewhere, because more that the time passes and less becomes the chance of being able to establish what they went out to do, which was one to do essentially to do a regime change. They'll begin to understand that regime change is not happening. It's not working. The transition has already happened from one leadership to another leadership, but that's not their idea of regime change, and therefore they may think whether it's really worth it or not. And as a face saver, they come and say that, look, let's sit down, talk, find some solutions. Possibly Iran will offer some solutions when it gets to that point.
Right. One last question before I wind up the interview, sir. That there are lots of reports of how Iran has used North Korean technology. The entire war is fought through artificial intelligence, and is that the reason where Iran has absolutely proven as a dark horse? Have they overpowered the military capacity of America? Can you also sense the same thing?
There's a lot of talk about this, but it's very difficult to judge at this stage. I think people who are well informed and people who understand strategic matters will come out with greater details once the main conflict is over. But certainly, whatever it is, it couldn't all have been done by Iran on its own. There must have been help from various partners that Iran is being able to put into this battle. But clearly, they are no walkover. I mean, they've fought back. They've held their position despite very heavy losses. They've held their position, and fighting against the might of Israel and the United States of America was not an easy job. But they've done it. And therefore, I think there are many lessons to be learned for all of us. But once we know more from strategic experts, I guess one can talk more about it.
But do you think that this is also a battle of sorts for who is a bigger superpower now. Now, the fact that there are reports coming in that China and Russia are on the same page when it comes to helping and protecting Iran. So, in a way, is it like two powers getting together to challenge America? So, is it that China and Russia, seemingly, and as the situation is unfolding, do you think that these two powers could decide when the Iran war will end?
Well, they would have a role. I mean, I think anybody at this point would have a role to bring things to an end. To get started is I think a more difficult job, but to put it to an end is tough. But more people can get involved in putting an end to the war that's going on, because war coming to an end doesn't mean that everything becomes hunky dory that very day. You stop fighting at each other, you stop killing each other, but there is a lot more that needs to be done to clear up the debris, as it were, of the war. We've seen what's happened in Gaza. Now everyone's forgotten what happened in Gaza, but Gaza was flattened out. Now there's nobody talking about that. How are people living there today? How are they in tents or not in tents? And how are they managing their supply chains, the food, electricity, water, etc.? So all that has to be done once the main conflict and the firing comes to an end. But I think there has to be a major rethink in Israel. We don't know from the ground Israel's population's feelings, but I'm quite sure that the population of Israel doesn't quite think along the lines of the Prime Minister of Israel. They also want to live in peace. People all want to live in peace. But today the complicating factor is, when the war comes to an end, what will happen with the GCC countries? What will happen with the Arab countries that have pushed themselves into this battle or have been pushed into this battle? They'll need to sort things out as well. So there are many complicating features that will probably go on for many, many months after the firing comes to an end, hostilities come to an end, and then the rebuilding process starts. Rebuilding of faith, rebuilding of the rule-based order, the rebuilding of people's shattered lives, etc. That will take many, many months.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khurshid, for joining on HW News. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best.